Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Haynes. Tonight on Greater Boston, a new UN report is sounding the alarm on climate change, warning that we will hit the point of no return in the next decade if we don't act fast to protect our planet. Boston's environment chief and a BU professor of environmental health join me on what it means for us here in Massachusetts and beyond. Then, my conversation with the president of Brigham and Women's Hospital on his first year on the job and how he is addressing racial disparities in medicine. Well, it is now officially spring, but here in Massachusetts, it hasn't exactly been the long, cold, and snowy winter that New England is known for. In fact, this winter tied with the 2015-2016 winter as the state's warmest on record. That's according to the National Centers for Environmental Information. And between December and February, temperatures averaged just below 34 degrees, up nearly 8 degrees from last century. So record-breaking warm winter days have raised the alarm bells over the past few months and are part of a bigger, more alarming trend. A new report out of the UN is issuing perhaps the most dire climate change warning yet, estimating the world will likely surpass a dangerous and irreversible temperature threshold in the next decade. So the report warns that heat waves, droughts, wildfires, flooding, and tropical storms will become more common and more extreme. In addition to worsening natural disasters, the rising temperatures are also expected to exacerbate a number of health conditions and further limit access to food, water, and housing. And we are running out of time to reverse these trends, or the UN Secretary General put it,
humanity is on thin ice, and that ice is melting fast.
It is a frightening scenario, but there is still some time left to act here. So what can we do to prevent this from becoming a reality as a country, as a city, and as everyday citizens? To discuss this, I'm joined now by Reverend Mariama White-Hammond, Boston's Chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Spaces, and Patrick Kinney, a professor of environmental health at Boston University School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Professor Kinney, I want to start with you. You know, this is the most dire warning that the UN has actually put out yet. So break that down for us, because I think we're talking about a matter of 1 or 2 degrees, but that can make a huge impact.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2 degrees on the average, but the extremes are really where the impacts are. And as you noted, this past winter has been a really extreme for us, and we've been really experiencing the reality of climate change over the last few years. It's really, though, a trend that's been occurring over about the last 50 years. You know, scientifically, we can see the trend in the data, but now it's really becoming very tangible. And so I think this report, it's, you know, a series of reports, but this latest one really is the most dire and strident in its impact, I hope. And I think it really, the urgency is great. And so I hope this report, you know, gets people's attention and really, you know, helps us double down on the action that needs to be done to address this problem.
Yeah, what was something that maybe particularly stood out to you? I mean, you've been obviously looking at the data for a number of years, but this particular report, I imagine, highlighted some areas that we really need to be focused on.
Well, there are many. You know, locally, we experience extreme heat in the summertime, causing excess mortality and morbidity. And we've done some studies at our Center for Climate and Health recently that show that children are especially vulnerable to extreme heat. There's something like 12% of emergency department visits in the summertime are caused by extreme heat nationwide. So those are some of the findings that we're seeing. But I think the report really also emphasizes a really important point, which is that the people that are most affected by climate change are generally the people that have been least responsible for causing the problem. So there's really an important sort of equity issue here as well.
Yeah, and Reverend White-Hammond, I know that you've been working in community on issues involving the climate, but also the rising heat, especially in urban areas. What are you seeing in terms of this impact, at least most recently?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I grew up in Boston, and I lived on the 3rd floor of a old home with no air conditioning. And so as a young person, I remember this, you know, relying on that small fan. But it's things like, I don't feel like my parents could sustain themselves without having air conditioning units because it's not safe at their age. They're healthy folks, but the reality is that our seniors and our young people are the folks that are having the hardest time being able to regulate temperatures. We had a grandmother come and testify at one of our hearings, a grandmother from Chinatown, whose granddaughter fainted. And she said, that's not supposed to happen. I'm not supposed to have to worry that my granddaughter can't be outside. So the effects are tangible for everybody. People who work outside, for instance, are extremely vulnerable. Folks who have any kind of health conditions or particularly respiratory conditions, which unfortunately, because of the advent of COVID-19, you're seeing even more people that have sort of long COVID symptoms. So the reality is the effects are not just, more deserts in Northern Africa. The effects are happening right here in the city. I grew up in one of our heat islands, and I live in another one of our heat islands. I am thankful at this point in my life to have central air conditioning, but I know what it is not to have that. And for some of our communities, that can literally be a major health threat and drive people to the emergency room in the most extreme cases, leading to people dying younger than they have to.
I want to point out we have some numbers on the average temperature here in the Bay State in Massachusetts from 2018 to 2022 from the National Centers for Environmental Information. And you can see from 2018 to 2022, we're talking about 49.5 degrees in 2018, and then that rising to 50.4 degrees when we're talking about a specific range there. Again, we're talking about degrees, but the impact, Professor Kinney, ends up being larger. And the scientific community has rung this bell before, and many times.
Yeah, that's for sure. The scientific community has been talking about this for decades, really. And it's been frustrating how slow the progress has been. Over the last decade or so, I think the progress has been especially promising at the level of cities and regions, and Boston's been one of the leaders in climate action, at least setting goals for climate action. Federally, it's been much slower until recently with the Inflation Reduction Act, and really, which is a climate act in many ways. So there's some trends moving in the right direction. It's taken longer than it should have, and I'm just hopeful that we can really act quickly over the next decade or so, as this report is telling us we need to avert the worst consequences. I mean, during our lifetimes, it's going to get worse, but it's going to be especially challenging for our children and their children. And so what we do now really will have a huge impact on their lives, and I think it's important for us to really take this seriously.
I'm interested about what you said about how the Inflation Reduction Act is really a climate matter, and I'd love to hear more about that as we are talking about interest rates today and the Fed raising them. I
didn't get a chance to hear the news. How much did they raise them by?
You're putting me on the spot a little bit, but they've raised it to some degree.
Okay,
yeah. But talk to me about this correlation between that and the climate.
The Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of incentives for going green and in terms of reducing fossil fuel burning, and incentives for electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, that sort of thing. And so I think, and it might seem ironic in a way that we're suggesting people move to more electricity, because a lot of electricity is generated using fossil fuels, but more and more it's not. More and more we're getting our electricity from renewable sources, and cheap solar electricity is becoming way more available. So the move to electricity is really important, and it's going to reduce our impact on the climate. But more importantly, or as importantly, locally, the air quality is going to improve, and that's going to make everybody healthier.
And I do know my Cracker Jack team were able to look it up. It is 0.25%. So the Fed raised the interest rate 0.25%, and that's despite all of the other mitigating factors. So we do know that tonight. Reverend White-Hammond, you know, we spoke about the big health impacts and also what the city has been working toward to sort of mitigate the impact of climate change. And I'm always thoughtful when we have this conversation, not only of those heat islands, but of the seaport and the rising water of the seaport.
Yeah, so I think we have a number, you know, Boston is the fourth most vulnerable city to climate change in the United States. And that's because we have 47 miles of coastline. And each of them, all along each stretch, we've already done the work to sort of map where our flood pathways are and really think about how we need to close those. In some instances, we've gotten started. We've looked at places that we own the land. For instance, if you go to the North End, Papalo Langoni Park, that is a park that we owned, and we use the opportunity of redesigning that park to raise the seawall, but also to make that part of a baseball field and bocce courts and all of those things. So people will enjoy it, but it's also providing them protection from sea level rise. But I think, you know, going back to the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, the reality is what this IPCC report says is we need a full economy transformation, and we needed it yesterday, but we've got to drive to it today with urgency. And I think part of what makes, you know, particularly Mayor Wu is part of that younger generation that has grown up with the reality of climate change. And they are saying to us, we need you to take action now because it's going to be even worse for us. And our children are not even guaranteed the kind of basic security that we've come to rely on. And so this question of how do we transform our economy? Because right now our economy is driven by fossil fuels. And if we keep being driven by fossil fuels, we know where we're headed. That's what the reports tell us. We are headed to an unimaginable and dangerous future. But I think one of the exciting pieces of that is that full economy transformation is at the heart of this idea behind the Green New Deal, that we could address environmental issues at the same time that we transform our economy. And in doing so, we can lift up many of our communities that have been left out of the economy as it is right now. Earlier, I think just yesterday, we had a program that we started in Boston, Power Corps, which replicates a program started in Philadelphia that's taking young people from some of our more economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, Dorchester and Roxbury and East Boston, and training them in cutting-edge green jobs. And so they're learning how to do what they call smart building technology. How do you really increase the efficiency of a building so that it needs less energy? We want to make sure that it's using renewable energy. But the first way to address our climate crisis is to use less energy, and then to make sure that that energy is green as possible. So I just got off the phone with some folks at the Federal Reserve who have a Power Corps intern. They're learning how their buildings work and learning how that young person can be part of this green revolution and make sure that the Fed building is as efficient as it possibly can be, that it's turning off the lights when they need to, that it's making sure that the heating and cooling match what's actually needed, and not those situations that many of us experience, especially as women, where we're wearing, you know, a parka jacket in the middle of the summer because the air condition is a little bit too high. So there are all of these ways that we can address this crisis in a way that lifts up communities that have not contributed to this in nearly the same way, and making sure that they can enter the economy and feed their families and do well. So we are not choosing between economic justice and environmental justice. Those two things are inextricably linked together.
Yeah, and Professor Kinney, I mean, when people ask you this question, what can we do? What can I do to help, you know, whether it's affect change in my carbon footprint, whether it's recycle more, whether it's, you know, what can a person at home do that may be watching this to help reverse what we're seeing in the climate?
Yeah, to really take the greatest action against climate change as an individual, we need to figure out ways to reduce our own carbon footprints. And that means stop burning as much fossil fuels. And the achievability of that ambition varies. Some things are expensive to do, but if you're driving a gas-powered car, trying to see how you can end up getting an electric vehicle is would make a big benefit. If you have a home that's
the T.
Excuse me?
Or take the T.
I said, or take the T.
I was going to say, yeah, public transportation is the other thing, and we should be really advocating for the T to transform all of its fleet to electric vehicles, including the commuter rail, because there's a lot of pollution that's being generated by those vehicles. But getting people into those vehicles is a good thing for the environment, even with fossil fuel, because you burn a lot less in a bus than you do driving your own vehicle. So those are, public transportation, conversion to electricity, and also in the home heating, we're going to have to move our homes towards electric heat as well, which is going to be a challenge economically as well as from a technological point of view. But the technology is there, and there's some incentives in this new Inflation Reduction Act for converting to these heat pumps, which a lot of people are starting to do. I think homeowners can do that, but also I think tenants need to advocate for landowners to start doing that as well. And there need to be more incentives at the local level to make that happen quickly. It has to happen fast, really over the next decade.
And I think the T piece is so important as we sort of continue to call for the T to be more efficient, to run on time. I mean, frankly, and I think to be a reliable source so that folks can use that rather than drive into the city and have those issues. And I think about that in your community work, Reverend White-Hammond, when we talk about a reliable T in public transportation as what everyday folks who maybe don't have the income to purchase an electric vehicle can do to reduce their carbon footprint.
Yeah, so I am a T rider. I took it in this morning. I take it most days. And I think, we all need to be in it together advocating for the resources the T needs to function well for us all. I do want to offer one other thing that folks can do. If you are a Boston resident, we have a program called Boston Community Choice Electricity. And this is a program that will help you not just go green, but also save you money. The standard rate in the city, the standard rate on Eversource is about 25 cents a kilowatt hour. Our 100% green energy is only 14 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's because we negotiated those rates in a 3-year contract. So we hope that people will, one, consider switching over to community choice energy. And then if you're already on community choice electricity, that you would consider opting up. The standard rate is 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's 30% green. But we know that there's more of us that can afford to do 14 cents. I know that there are some people who need the lowest they possibly can. But if you got a little bit left over at the end of the month, thinking about how you can join a 100% green energy program. And so you can find that you can call 311 in the city of Boston. You can also find that in the boston.gov/BCCE. And I also want to note, there are many other cities and towns that also have this program. It may not be the same exact as ours, and the rates are slightly different, but many of them are cheaper than the standard rate, and they give you an opportunity to support moving more of our electricity green.
All right, great. Well, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Reverend Mariama White-Hammond and Patrick Kinney, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, we've talked a lot on this show about inequities in health care, including financial barriers and racial disparities in care, with patients of color often treated with less urgency and understanding than their white counterparts. But there are also major disparities for the people doing the caring, particularly when it comes to surgeons. A 13-year-long study recently published in the Journal of American Medical Association found that there is, quote, underrepresentation of Black physicians at every stage in surgical training, and Black men are especially likely to be missing from this profession, with their graduation rate from U.S. general surgery declining in those years, while application rates have gone up slightly. It is part of a larger problem that Dr. Robert Higgins has seen firsthand for decades, first as a surgeon, then as surgeon-in-chief at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and now as the president of Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Higgins joined me earlier this week to dig into the disparities and how he plans to address them at the Brigham. Dr. Higgins, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Really an opportunity for me to spend some time with you. Thank you.
So what was your journey into surgery yourself?
Well, I was blessed. My dad was a physician. He passed away early in our lives, but my mom kept that image of what we should do and how we should accomplish, and created a great environment for us for scholarship and participation. Kind of kept us out of trouble, my two brothers and I. So I always knew that I wanted to be a physician, and then got the opportunity through lots of great sponsorship and mentorship and an educational environment that gave me the opportunities. And so my path has been moving forward in that direction, and here I am today. Surprised as I am to be at a place like Boston in a fantastic institution, hopefully leading others to find their way in this career as well.
Well, I want to ask you about that, because what were some of the challenges as you were trying to get into this profession and now, leading one of Boston's top hospitals?
Well, it was all about academic preparation, and then showing that you could do the work, and then preparation for the rigors of training, going to medical school, and then going through the general surgery training. I grew up thinking I wanted to be a transplant surgeon, and ended up in a cardiovascular space, so I did a heart and lung transplant, and that's how I kind of blazed a trail, as it were, as one of few African-American men in the field. I had an opportunity to be a role model. I had great mentorship and people who sponsored me. And I think the opportunities were obvious for me. I had to perform at a very high level along with my peers who were in the majority, but I was really blessed to get those opportunities. And now I think it's paid dividends as being here at one of the great institutions in America, and actually around the world, the Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Mass General Brigham system. So I feel honored to have been here to lead these programs, and I have to reach back now and help mentor and sponsor young people who want to follow in those footsteps.
Why do you think, we mentioned the decline from this JAMA study, why do you think the number of black surgeons, especially black male surgeons, is declining?
Well, I think it's in all of medicine. Many of the persons of color who don't have opportunities to get early educational reinforcement, the resources they need to be academically prepared, whether it come from high school to college to pre-medical curriculum and then into medical school, they just don't have the kind of the support that they may need to be successful and the reinforcement. They certainly have the ability and the aptitude, but it's all about kind of mentorship and sponsorship. And so if they don't get those resources, they don't find that path. And I think compared to law or business, even finance, I think it's a shorter path. It's less onerous, maybe. It took me 9 years to go through my surgical training from graduation from undergraduate experience. So that's a long time. I had a significant financial debt and had to pay that back before I got my first job at age 34. So that's a long time to train and to be kind of in preparation for your career and your future. And I think that's part of the obstacles that I think young persons, particularly of color, face.
And there's a shortage of doctors, across the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to reinforce the importance of physicians in dedication to their communities. That's really, really an important part of the equation for all physicians, primarily in the primary care, but also in the specialty areas. But these are challenges that we all face, and we have to do our best to kind of invigorate the environments. I think one of the challenges, of course, is the destination has to be pretty special. And we're trying to create a more diverse and inclusive workplace so that persons of color who come into medicine feel like they're welcome there. And that's part of my job, is to make sure that the Brigham and the Mass General Brigham are welcoming for physicians who would come from diverse backgrounds.
And we know that the data supports that if a doctor, a nurse, or someone in a healthcare space looks like you as a patient, you feel more comfortable in talking about your symptoms and working with that doctor on a treatment plan. So is that why the focus on diversity is so important?
I think it's critically important.
Yeah.
I think creating some role models to follow in the footsteps makes a world of difference to a young person looking up to somebody and saying, I can be that person. But you can't be what you can't see. And classically what happens is our role models, as laudable as it is, don't look like people that come from your community. They don't look like folks that you would spend time with in a social setting. And so it's hard to follow in those footsteps. So I think if I can be successful and prove that someday an intern or a resident who's working through the process could grow up to be the president of the Brigham, well, then maybe we've blazed a trail.
What are some of the things you're doing at the Brigham to help create more of that inclusive space among staff and, you know, that patient care that you're looking for?
Well, it really is about making people feel welcomed in the environment. Sometimes these academic environments are not welcoming to those folks who are not in the majority. And so we have to create an environment that nurtures their well-being. They have to feel like they're included and valued in that space. So we're doing a lot of programming through the Center for Diversity and Inclusion to make people feel like they have a place at the Brigham and at the Mass General and all of these other institutions, Johns Hopkins. That really is a big deal. Once they feel like they're welcome there, then they can excel, they can kind of grow, they can develop. And if we take them along the way, we can teach them how to be great physicians. They can take care of a diverse patient population and really make a difference. And so that's the challenge, but it's not going to happen overnight. We had a program in Baltimore. We were teaching young people preparing for college. So they're taking their SAT preparation so they can get into college, and then that's 4 years of college, and then they go 4 years of medical school, and then general surgery training would be 5 years, or medical training would be another 4 or 5 years, and then specialty training for a cardiac surgeon is another 3 years. That's a long time, and it's a huge investment of time and energy, and expensive. And so I think that's one of the challenges we have to overcome, is the socioeconomic challenge of getting into the medical field and then training and then feeling like at the end of the rainbow, you're going to cash in, so to speak, and have a fruitful career. You can do great things. You can take care of patients and really make a difference in the world.
What external forces need to sort of be rallied? Is it more state funding for STEM programs? Is it more affordable colleges? Is it what external factors could help with your internal work at the Brigham?
Well, I think these young people are taking on a huge debt. You know, my son had a well over a six-figure debt, which he's now paying back. We're helping him out, of course. But even people of means still have to spend an incredible amount of time and energy to get to that destination. And I think if you, you know, I came from a single-parent home. We didn't have resources to kind of spend on big educational expenses, so we borrowed student loans. So I think the federal government tried to kind of reduce the stress on federal debt for medical students and pre-medical, you know, curriculum. There's some resistance to that, I guess, across the country. But I think that's one way to help promote young people to pursue the career so they don't have to take on a six-figure debt to get there. I think creating opportunities for them as they're training, helping them feel like they are, again, welcomed in that environment, changing the culture of medicine, which is more welcoming for persons of color, black and brown, as well as women, to make sure that they have an opportunity to feel like they can grow and develop in those spaces.
Dr. Higgins, thank you so much for your time.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. Look forward to doing great things with you.
All right, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Crystal Haynes. Good night.
In the heart of North